Welcome to the Prescription Strength Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lynette Hewitt, GP and personal trainer, bringing you health and strength without the hype. Thanks for listening. Chloe, thanks for joining me on the podcast to talk about what I would agree with you is a very important topic. CPR, and in particular, people receiving CPR in public, which you would assume should be fair and equal and certainly gender neutral. But it turns out that's not the case, as you brought to me, and yes, I wasn't aware. So tell us what you know about this and why you're passionate about it.
So this is something I came across almost by accident, and it's one of those facts when you see it, like, how is this not something that we all know and we're all doing something about? I was working on a project to do with women in STEM, and it was one of those kind of, you come across pieces of information and you suddenly end up on a different project, which became what we're to talk about today. Mm-hmm. It all started with a statistic from a study from Duke University, which is that women are statistically less likely to receive bystander CPR than men. And it turns out there have actually been quite a few studies done on this, and they all say the same thing. And I don't know about you, but I hear something like that and I'm like, I can't just sit around and see that. Why is no one doing something about this?
Yeah.
And after digging into it, I found people are doing something about it. They're looking into it and they're finding solutions, but nothing's really happening.
So hit us with the statistic that obviously gave you a slap round the face and made you go, what? Because I know when you shared it with me, I went, what?
Yeah.
It's that bad? And I think people need to know this.
Yeah. So I think the one from Duke University is that women are 14% less likely. But other studies have shown anything from 5% all the way up to about 30%.
Yeah, 30%. So I was having a little look around after you brought this to my attention, and I was certainly seeing numbers in and around 30%.
Yeah.
So significantly less likely to receive CPR simply by nature of the fact that they are female, and this causes people to hesitate.
Yes, exactly. And there was a survey done by the British Heart Foundation where they asked people, would you be more or less likely to give CPR to a woman or a man? And they found that nearly a quarter of the people they asked were less likely to give CPR to a woman. And they were all quoting things like discomfort, worrying about doing it wrong, worrying about hand placement. Mm-hmm. And these are all things, again, you go into a first aid session, you don't really think about it, do you? You look at the mannequin on the floor and you think, that's a pretty androgynous looking piece of kit. So...
And certainly as doctors, we are meant to do CPR training every year. And as far as I'm aware, that's going on. All hospital staff, I'm not sure of the frequency with which they get it, but those of us working in the sector have all seen those dummies. And the justification for us repeating it every year is so that it becomes an automatic behaviour.
Yes.
People in an emergency need to be able to act on impulse and through repetition, and not have to stand and think and make considered actions. Now, we can't necessarily expect that of the general public who haven't perhaps been trained, but we do have a responsibility, I think, as the profession that is leading on this, to educate people as to what to expect from people's bodies. And it's fair to say we are falling very short of the mark then, given what you found.
Yes, yeah. And this kind of leads into, what I'm kind of campaigning for, which is to include female-bodied mannequins in these training sessions. So for the general public as well, when you do a first aid course. I know I did first aid at school. I did cadets as well and did it there. Mm-hmm. And quite a lot of professions require you to do first aid at work and things like that. And there was, again, looking into this, a really interesting study done in Spain, which was actually done with 80 undergraduate nurses. So these people who you'd think would be, all professional. I mean, I'm sure they were very professional anyway. But these people who will have had that exposure and that training. But they ran a training session with both male and female mannequins. And they took measurements at the start and end of the session of various things. And the statistics from the beginning of the session are actually a little bit concerning.
Go on.
Because they were much slower to initiate CPR by about 5 seconds, which again doesn't sound like a lot, but when you factor in the fact, if you've got someone who's never done CPR before, they're going to hesitate even more. Hand placement was only correct 57.5% of the time, compared to about 97% on the male mannequin. Correct AED pad placement was only correct about 31% of the time, again compared to 98% of the time on the male mannequin.
Mm-hmm.
And it was slower to place the AED pads, which again, and all these things in an emergency situation add up. And
Yeah.
as I'm sure you know, that time factor is so critical when you've got someone who is, well, it was effectively dead at that point usually, or suffering from a cardiac arrest or heart attack.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I do remember from my repeated CPR training is that time is of the essence. So as long as that person is in cardiac arrest, that heart is still and that blood isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So the sooner you can get that blood moving, the better. And yes, 5 seconds might not be a lot when you're waiting for a bus or a train, but in human physiology, that makes a huge difference. And I guess it's then the compounding effect, isn't it, of a delay to get started and then another delay as to, well, where do you put your hands, or, oh, this doesn't quite look like what I've expected. Then the potential for other thoughts to creep in about, well, what might the people behind me, because you know what it's like for how quickly a crowd can develop in a public place if somebody's on the
We're
floor.
all nosy buggers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just rubbernecking on the motorway. It goes on. It goes on all over the place. And I had a little look earlier on, actually. I was just seeing what comes up when you start doing a Google image search for CPR or community defibs, because we see them everywhere now. They are in public places all over the place. And all of them are diagrams, and generally they are androgynous looking or gender neutral at best. So these are the images that people will be seeing, whether they are just looking at it out of interest or whether they are doing a remote course because, I don't know, they need access to know. Maybe you work somewhere, you might even work in a shop, but there's a defib out the back and perhaps you've not had training. But if you were to look at the images that you see online when you bring it up, they are pretty basic and I would argue not representative of what people look like in real life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So people aren't being prepared for a real person, other than this default male that we're seeing.
So you're looking at this and, this suddenly comes into your world, and what did you do next?
The first thing I did was I submitted an application to start a petition.
Okay.
Implement a basic standard to include female mannequins in all first aid and CPR training courses in the UK.
So what was the time frame between, I'm imagining you're sitting scrolling like we all do, and this pops along and you go to bed thinking about it, and then you're still thinking about it the next day. Right. What was the kind of time frame of if you thinking, oh, I need to do something about this?
I think from the first thing, statistic, I spent a couple of days researching it to kind of see, because the first thing you do, isn't it, you start looking at, is this a viable solution? Is this something that actually makes a difference? Which it has been proven to do. And then, yes, I think it was a few days of research. And then I thought, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to start a petition because, something needs to be done.
And it's probably appropriate to say at this time that you are an engineer and you have an engineer's mind. And I have to say categorically that every patient I've looked after in my over now 20 years of medical career who's been an engineer, they want explanations. You don't fob off an engineer with any kind of fudgy explanation.
They want all the numbers.
They want the numbers. They want to understand the process and the systems. And I love that. I think we need much more of that type of thinking in healthcare, not in its entirety, but to bring it in for that kind of, okay, well, hang on, what's going on here? What's the system that's at play? And what needs to change in order to improve the outcomes at the other end? And so I think that's relevant, your way of thinking and approaching
stuff. My mind works, Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's really important. This isn't about ideology. You're not an activist with several causes under your belt, trying to change the world. This is
practical.
It's a practical, systemic type of view of looking at, or systematic, should I say, of what can we do about this?
Because it's very easy to look at it and think, oh, this is just about, this is political correctness gone mad, which is, it's really not, but that is the reaction I've got from a couple of people. But I look for very practical solutions. And obviously the training on female mannequins, that's not going to fully solve the problem. There are a lot of other factors at play, but a lot of those are more social, societal problems, which are much more difficult I think one of the things that's come out, because obviously I've done a few videos on this, I do a lot of content creation. One of my videos went a little bit mad for all the wrong reasons.
Go on.
The comment section was filled with a lot of people talking about false accusations of sexual assault from giving CPR. And what I will say first off is that there is no recorded cases of someone ever being charged with sexual assault from giving CPR to a woman. People have tried to sue for things like broken ribs. I think the closest thing that I have seen to this being a problem was there was a teacher, I think, in China where someone had collapsed. A doctor was nearby and started doing CPR. But as I'm sure you know, CPR is quite tiring. So she asked someone to come in and take over from her because as you weaken, your CPR becomes less effective. And this guy stepped in and he did CPR and someone filmed it, ended up online. And a few people made some stupid comments about his hand placement. Or does his hands need to be that close to her breast? Things like that. But what, again, I will say about this is everyone at the scene who was physically there and saw it defended him. The woman's family defended him. And to be honest, most people online were defending him as well. But it seems like there is this fear predominantly from men, which again, this isn't just men being less likely to perform CPR. Women are less likely to perform CPR on women as well. But there does seem to be that big fear in men. And I feel like the comment section got a little bit hijacked talking about false accusations in general. But I can see through, again, a lot of false information and sort of, you see a lot of Reddit stories and stuff being brought up. That is the danger of misinformation, is that it's convincing people that there is something to be scared of when there isn't.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning as well, because I think this issue of when to intervene is part of a bigger concern for lots of things. But in a life or death situation, you would be protected as a citizen or as a health professional because of the emergency situation that is in front of you.
Yeah.
And even if that patient was successfully resuscitated and tried to, because I don't know, whoever, they're a lunatic, they tried to take some sort of action against you, the law would be on your side. So I think that probably needs repeated loudly so that it drowns out some of the nonsense that but people that can't wait to jump in and stoke the fear, which really doesn't have any placement. Like you said, there are no recorded cases of any in case law here in the UK of anything happening like that at all. But then you've got the social awkwardness.
Yes, because you will have to, if you're placing an AED pads on a woman, you're going to have to remove clothing, and actually to do effective CPR, you may have to remove clothing as well. And unsurprisingly, that can make people uncomfortable, and not just for themselves, but again, like you said, if you've got a crowd of people, you're removing someone's clothing, you're worried about that, the patient's modesty, but also what other people are going to think. Yeah. Which, again, in that situation, shouldn't be a factor, but we can't help it. We're human.
Yeah. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we are all subject to these kind of internal pauses or hesitancies, I suspect, probably less so if you've done CPR in a clinical setting as part of your job, then yes, you're not going to hold back. But that's not the case for most people. And I think as we now have, as we've said, defibs all over the place, then this needs to be part of the conversation. Absolutely. And this wider issue of actually what bodies look like in real life and how that feeds into where do you put the pads on somebody when you've undressed them and they don't look like the dummy that you saw on the diagram. And even on the diagrams, I was laughing to myself today where there is a female and there's illustrations of where the pads go. The females look like a size 6 or size 8 teenage body with breasts that don't look like most women's breasts in
breasts,
in real life. I mean, this is part of a bigger issue again of
any woman with a reasonably sized chest will be familiar with what I'll refer to as the splay.
Yes. Yeah.
You lie down and suddenly they're pointing in opposite directions.
Yes. And breasts have to be moved out of the way in order to get the pads in the right place. And if somebody is literally in cardiac arrest, do it. And it needs to be included in part of the conversation. And I mean, technically thinking about how stiff these mannequins are that we train people on, it would be a challenge. But it isn't, in my experience, being talked about, even in a clinical setting where it's being trained. To my knowledge. That said, haven't done one for a while, probably need to refresh it.
And that's, again, something I think this would improve is having female mannequins in the training. It gives that talking point as well. You can say,
Yeah.
we have these because this is happening. And you can
Yeah.
talk about the fact that you will have to manhandle the breast if they're of a certain size,
Yeah.
or, if the woman is of a certain age, and,
Yeah.
you will
Yeah.
physically
Yeah.
have to move them. You can't be afraid to do that, as much as it will make people uncomfortable, especially men, I suspect. Although women, let's be honest, we're not comfortable with manhandling each other's breasts either.
No.
Usually.
But if you think about the demographic of people who are more likely to have a cardiac arrest, they are not your young women whose boobs still look like they did when you were 15 or 16. That those people aren't really having cardiac arrests. It is older people who wear several layers of clothes. Bra wires get in the way. They're another complicating factor. And this needs to be talked about. And I think a reassuring message needs to be coming down from our sector in order to start to quell this fear, because yourself, you'll have received comments, like you've already said, on some of these posts, and it only takes one or two people. You can get 100 great comments on a piece of content, and it's always the one troll that you go to bed grumbling about because of just the way we're wired and the way we tend to see these things. And I think this matters. One person saying, yeah, but I heard that so and so in this place 100 miles away once had a complaint. It becomes this Chinese whispers of things, and you think.
And I think a classic case of this, and something that I've had to correct a lot of people on, was the Cassidy Boone case. And I don't know how many people will remember that. I think it was about 10 years ago now. But there was a woman. So Cassidy Boone is actually a fictional character in a satirical skit. He did a video for social media claiming that a man had saved her from drowning, and she was charging him with sexual assault and all this kind of stuff. It was a satirical skit, which in my opinion was in incredibly poor taste. I mean, regardless of the time, but especially around then when there was a lot of people coming forward about these things. But I've had that quoted at me as, but there was this woman. I was like, oh my God, not again. No, please tell me you're not talking about Cassidy Boone.
Goodness me, it's like quoting a Harry Enfield character.
Yeah.
That was actually real life.
At the time, spread it as a real story because they believed it, and there was some news articles who quoted it as being a real thing, and they had to be corrected on it. And honestly, I think that's been the bane of my life since I started this position, is that one case.
Yeah. So are you aware of any other organisations who are making noise about this? I would love to think that some of the, emergency charities that we've got, or the Resuscitation Council, have you had any contact with any of those bigger organisations?
So I know St John's Ambulance have done a couple of campaigns on it. They did, they made some special bras for it, which is fantastic, which is more approaching telling people that women are okay with you touching them, and trying to make people feel more comfortable and confident by saying this person is okay with you saving their life. You'd think that wouldn't need to be said, but what they're doing is fantastic. And clearly it does need to be said. So they've done a few things on it. I know the British Heart Foundation, again, they were the ones who did the survey about, asking people. So it's being covered by these organisations. I am in touch with the British Heart Foundation about the petition. I'm in the process of, I'm waiting to hear back from them regarding, them either supporting it or potentially promoting it. And again, I've tried to get in touch with St John's Ambulance as well. So hopefully having them back this, or even, again, St John's Ambulance, if they were to sort of set the standard, sort of set an example and start including it in their training. Because I think, again, another practical thing that needs to be addressed is cost. Because mannequins are relatively expensive. However, you can get sort of breast attachment overlays. It's basically just big silicone thing, attach over the top of a regular dummy, relatively cheap. So again, we're not asking, especially because charities who do first aid training, some of them are not for profit, we don't want to ask them to spend tons of money buying brand new mannequins when they can just adapt one that's already there.
I would have thought you could be quite creative with a decent sized bra and some balloons or something to make the point. I mean, I would challenge anyone who said that cost is a factor, because it's, from what we're saying, actually even the conversation isn't happening on a training level, or if it is, it's only just beginning. It certainly isn't filtering down into the mainstream, and I think that's part of the reason why I think your petition's fantastic and why we wanted to record this conversation is so that people listening can share this and just start to think about it, because that's how change happens, doesn't it? Is that you've got to, first of all, have an awareness of the problem. You don't have to have the finished final solution in mind. It's just beginning that process of bringing this onto people's attention. And it speaks to a bigger issue about women's healthcare and how it has always been perhaps, let me choose my words very carefully, perhaps how it's been undervalued relative to male healthcare. If we look at the research, often in medical research, women tend to end up being excluded from a lot of trials for various reasons. We're more complicated health-wise. So that's been a factor. And the news or the publicity around menopause has helped to shine a light on that. But
Absolutely,
we're decades away from it changing. But it doesn't mean it's not going to change overnight. None of these things do. It's beginning the conversation, isn't it?
Yes. And again, even if this petition doesn't go through, I'm hoping it does. And I've been in touch with my local MP who's bringing it up with the Department of Health and Social Care as well, like directly, which if they can do something even without the petition would be fantastic. But again, even if this doesn't make any practical changes at the end of it, I just hope it's started a conversation.
Yeah.
It's raised those issues about false accusations. They don't happen in these cases.
Yeah.
Making people aware that this is something they need to think about in their training, right? I need to think about what would I do? How would I place the AD pads? Where would I place my hands? And even, like you say, just thinking about these things and being aware of them I hope would improve the statistics.
Yeah, certainly. What is the process with a petition then? So it's live, I know, because I've signed it. What are the stages that it goes through? If it goes well, what happens?
So obviously the first stage is you submit it, they run their checks, make sure it's something that's a valid petition, because I'm sure all sorts of things must get submitted.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Oh God, I'd hate to be one of those people who has to filter through them. They go through their checks, they make any changes, they come back and say, okay, you can publish this, but we'll need to change this, this and this. Once it's live, you have 6 months to gain signatures. If it gains 10,000 signatures, the government has to respond. If it gains 100,000 signatures, it can be raised for debate in Parliament.
Right, okay. What does respond mean?
I feel like that is a very deliberately vague term. Because I've seen there was another petition, which I will mention because I think it's fantastic, about endometriosis and menstrual leave for people with endometriosis. And they did receive, there was, I think, over 70,000 signatures for it. And they got a response, but the response was something along the lines of the government are not looking at implementing any changes at this time.
Okay, so technically they've had a response, they've upheld their part of the bargain, but you wonder how high up the hierarchy that got.
Yeah.
It's just an administration assistant going, just tell them no for that one. I mean, I don't know how Parliament works. But as we've said, it's about starting the conversation, highlighting an issue, and I am pretty confident that there'll be a lot of people listening to this who work in healthcare and will probably admit to having done a recent update, and this perhaps hasn't been part of the conversation. And I think there are other topics to consider in terms of people's size, like we've said, and the reality of medicine needs to catch up a little bit, I think, with society. I mean, obviously there is a little bit of a lag, but even in terms of bariatric adaptations and equipment and things coming into place, all of these things matter. And I think this is just part of the direction that we need to be steering things in order to get better outcomes for people, because at the minute that's not really good enough.
No. And as we said before, we can see exactly why these problems happen. So I've spoken to a few people, I've spoken to quite a lot of people, to be honest, about their own training. It's one of the things I did, when I first started the petition, to kind of get a gauge of what other people's, because I'd never trained on a female mannequin. But there are people saying they've trained on mannequins of plus-sized people.
Right.
And they've trained on those, but they never trained on a female mannequin.
Right.
Which, if we've got the adaptations for that one type of body type, why do we not have one that's...
Yeah.
I personally think the female mannequin would be more generic.
Yeah.
But even... So my husband was a medic previously in the Air Force. I'm chatting to some of his friends. Even some of them had never trained on a female mannequin. In fact, one of them, he did his training relatively recently, and he messaged my husband and said, "Oh, tell Chloe we had female mannequins in our training today." So
Right.
yes, fantastic. I doubt I had anything to do with it, but it's just great to know that it is happening. And there are
Yeah.
places that do it. There are charities and organisations that have got in touch with me and said, "Oh, we do this." Oh, yes,
Right.
fantastic, and that's great. But most of the people I've spoken to, they've never
Yeah.
done it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I haven't seen it, but again, not to be overly negative and cynical, but part of me thinks that, yeah, is it just female in that there is a vague version of a breast there, or actually
Yeah,
are these more representative of real life? And training has to prepare people for what you're likely to encounter. Otherwise, we're not getting it right. The system is at fault, isn't it? I mean,
exactly. And like we said earlier, even just a few seconds of hesitation, that
mm,
can make such a huge difference. I think it was every minute that passes without intervention
mm.
reduces the chance of survival by about 10%.
Mm. And it's worth mentioning that resuscitation from CPR, the data's not great anyway. So you're already on the back foot with a lot of this. I mean, your best chance of being successfully resuscitated is obviously somebody getting access to the defib and you being in a shockable rhythm for a start, because you can't just shock anybody. There's only certain rhythms that are amenable to it. So ideally you could do with being in hospital, quite close to an ICU or a coronary care
If you're going to have a
department.
cardiac arrest, try to do it in a hospital.
Yes, right under the anaesthetist, ideally,
Yeah,
who's part of the arrest team. But so out in the community, your odds are already drastically reduced. That said, the reason we see defibs everywhere is that they can make a difference. And there are thankfully people alive today who can attest to their lives being saved by somebody running and getting the defib and using it. But
and you shouldn't be scared of using a defib either, because I think a lot of people think, "Oh my god, this is a big scary bit of kit,"
yeah,
but it tells you what to do.
mm,
It gives you step-by-step instructions. And again, I
yeah,
think that's something that, again, not specifically to female, we might be going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think not being afraid to step in general, I guess,
mm.
because I think you do get that bystander effect.
Yeah. And I think in the process, the more people can reduce the delays that we've
Yes.
talked about and that compounding effect from all of those delays,
Yeah.
then the better. So if the only hesitation then is, oh God, there's a big thick bra here and how am I going to move that around? Okay, well, if we've eliminated all the other delays that lead up to that and
Yeah.
it turns out to be a shockable rhythm, then it's still worth doing and worth having this conversation in order to
Absolutely.
bring that to people's
And
attention.
to kind of go back to the study that I mentioned at the beginning, so just to give you an idea of how much of a difference training on a female mannequin can make. So at the end of the session, they timed everyone, they did it checked again and all that kind of stuff. So by the end of the session, the correct AED placement had gone up from 31% to 56%,
Right.
which I think is actually one of the biggest things is the AED pad placement, because as we were talking about earlier, you have to place them is
Yeah.
kind of around where the breasts are. You may have to maneuver them and things like that. They were less stressed. So actually, at the beginning of the session, they had higher heart rates and higher reported stress levels as well using the female mannequins. That had reduced by the end of the session. They reacted more quickly. They were quicker to initiate CPR, and they were quicker to apply the pads as well.
Okay. Although you said the correct placement was still only around 50% and they've just done a training session.
Yeah, that did concern me a little bit.
Why was it not 100%? Okay. Oh, okay.
But it's an improvement.
Yeah, maybe some people were daydreaming and perhaps not really paying full attention, I
Yeah.
suspect. Maybe I've got unrealistic expectations of what it should be. But I think there are pictures on inside the defib machines as to where to put the
Yes.
pad placement. But if you're presented with a body that looks quite different to the pads, it can be a significant challenge, and you may have to move breasts out of the way in men as well. And I think that's worth mentioning is that there are a lot of overweight men who would qualify for a decent bra in Marks and Spencer's if they were in and measured. And so you may still, especially when somebody's flat on their back
Yeah.
in a street outside the post office or whatever, then you may still have to do that. But yeah, it may not look like it. So I think there is absolutely a training need. So what would you want people to take away from this?
I mean, first of all, my own little plug of please go and sign the petition, because we've discussed the difference this
Yeah.
can make. Also, if you do a first aid training session, if it doesn't get brought up, ask the question.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're asking about what would we do with the female, and the person who's training might go, oh, well, the technique's the same, because the technique is the same.
Yes.
But what needs to be discussed is don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
As we said, not being afraid to manhandle people a little bit. And just having those conversations, I think, is a huge part of it.
Yeah. Asking the question, isn't it? I think that's key if you're in a session. I mean, obviously, if you're doing a very dry online update, then the potential to ask questions could be non-existent depending on what platform. And certainly in the NHS, a lot of mandatory training is being replaced by online tick boxy type modules where you can't ask questions. You just rush through it to get to the end and, get it over with. But if you're doing it in person, then absolutely asking questions. Know that you do not need consent for CPR in an unconscious person in this country.
That's another thing that comes up a lot is consent. It is, I think it comes under assumed consent. Something.
Yes, I think that's what it would be. And just reiterating that there have been no cases in law of anybody being sued, being prosecuted for any wrongdoing in this situation.
I think the closest has come to be someone, I'm sure a few people have tried to do for things like broken ribs. But again, if you're doing it properly, you are more than likely going to break someone's ribs. That is, and you're protected by, I think it's the SARH laws, SARH laws.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine it even getting to court, to be honest.
No one.
Any legal team would look at that and go, you're alive, mate. Thank you so much. Be grateful you're in a position to be able to seek legal advice.
Exactly.
There's no case to answer here. You can feel it. I've done CPR many times in hospital, and it is hard work.
Yes.
It makes you sweat, going back to the case you were talking about. So, you need to make sure that help is on the way. And that's one of the first things they teach you in training.
Always call the ambulance first.
Yes, don't start something without making sure help is on the way, because you'll only have to leave what you've started in order to go and get help.
And ideally, if you can, have another person ready to step in.
Certainly. And ignore the crowd that is inevitably going to gather around you. Filming it probably, but there's nothing we can do about that.
Again, what people fear as well is it's a video of them taking off a woman's shirt in public. I mean, there are enough context cues there to show what is actually going on, but that thought might be in the back of people's minds. Be reassured, people are not going to think that's what you're doing.
And actually, who cares? I mean, ultimately, you've done a good thing, and it's something to be celebrated.
Absolutely.
And not feared. Yeah, absolutely. These people who are standing at the ready with their phones. So I will link the petition in the show notes so people can easily find it. And I will also link it on any social media clips that I put out as well, because I think the easier we can make it for people to just be able to put their name on the signature, if you feel at all inclined that this is a topic worthy of at least acknowledgement by the government, whatever acknowledgement is going to mean, or hopefully that they will look at it if we could get enough signatures on it. When does it run until?
It is, I think, the 13th of March. It's the middle of March.
Okay, so we've got a bit of time to spread this. Great. Anything else you want to add, Chloe, on the back of this worthwhile project that you've been putting your time and effort into?
I think we've covered all the major things, but as we've said, just don't be afraid to step in. If you are in a situation where someone, man or woman, needs that help, I mean, let's be honest, there's very little you can do that's going to make their day any worse than it already is.
Yeah.
And you, in my books, and I'm sure in the books of everyone, men and women, you will be a hero for stepping in and helping.
That's a really important point. You can't make this worse. The worst thing you can do is do nothing.
Exactly.
And that would be a heavy burden to carry, I think, for people. So if somebody's already there and looks to have taken control of a situation, that's different. Don't get your phone out and film it.
I mean, again, be prepared to step in and help if that person needs help. Forget if they're doing CPR, they might need you to take over.
Yeah. But, I mean, my experience where I've been outside of work and something like this has gone is that actually people are good. People do want to do the right thing. I think this fear that gets shared around online doesn't match with my reality at this moment in time anyway. Who's to say that won't change? But I think that's true of a lot of things online. And actually people...
The internet isn't reality.
No, it really isn't. There's lots of examples of people doing nice things, but it doesn't make for a good Facebook story. It's much easier to spread drama, definitely. Drama and fear sells. Yeah.
And again, that's what I'm seeing in the comment sections is it's it's the loud minority, I think.
Yeah.
That loud minority can instill fear in people who would otherwise, who do want to do good.
Yeah.
And it's unfair of them to have that fear in the back of their mind when they shouldn't. They should feel
Yeah.
confident in stepping in and doing the right thing.
Yeah. 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 And the worst thing to do is do nothing.
Absolutely.
Chloe, thank you very much for taking this project on, and I'll certainly help share this message as far and wide as possible. I think it's really important. And even if you end up listening to this in 6 months' time and the petition's closed, this is still a really important topic. And as we said already, that this is the beginning of a process of trying to shift things, bring things up to date and more equal in terms of outcomes for women. I think that can only be a good thing. So
Absolutely.
thank you very much.
Thank you.